You're not gonna believe what happened with my own guest house. One day, I pull into my driveway and notice something weird. My spare key doesn't work. At first, I thought maybe the lock was just jammed, but nope. The lock had been completely changed, and the wildest part, it wasn't by me. Turns out, my HOA president, let's call her Karen, had decided to take matters into her own hands. Without asking, without warning, she had my guest house rekeyed. Now, here's where it gets even crazier. A couple of days later, I see a guy I don't recognize going in and out of the guest house like he owns the place. Turns out, that's Karen's nephew. She rented out my guest house to him without telling me anything. I mean, how is that even legal? The whole situation spiraled so fast. I went from mildly confused to seriously furious in a matter of hours. I started asking around, digging through HOA documents, even talking to neighbors, and what I found made me question everything about how far an HOA can really go. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was personal, calculated, and honestly, kinda scary. But here's where things take a turn I never expected, and that's where this story really begins. So here's some background that makes this even more insane. My guest house isn't part of the HOA, never was. When I bought the property, it was clear in the paperwork. The main house, sure, under the HOA, but the guest house? Completely separate. I've used it for friends, family, even rented it out a few times short-term. No issues. But recently Karen, our HOA president, started getting real nosy. She made little comments during meetings about unauthorized use and community standards, but I thought it was just her being, well, Karen. I brushed it off until the locks were changed. That's when I realized this wasn't just a power trip. She actually believed she had the right to control what I did with my own property. But renting it out to her nephew, that's on a whole other level. No permission, no lease agreement with me, and I never even got a heads up. The guy's just living there now like it's his personal erbe. I tried knocking, asking questions. Nothing. Karen claimed it was an HOA matter and that we'd discuss it at the next meeting. Like that makes any sense. I started wondering, was this some sort of revenge? Or was something else going on behind the scenes? Because the deeper I looked, the more things just didn't add up. So I started doing my own digging. I went through every HOA document I had, even pulled out the original property survey. Like I thought, the guest house was never included in the HOA boundary. But when I brought that up to Karen, she gave me this smug smile and said, well, things change. That's when I realized she'd rewritten something. Or at least tried too. I managed to get my hands on a recent HOA update that she'd pushed through without a full vote. Buried in the fine print was some vague wording about adjacent structures being subject to new community guidelines. No specifics, just enough gray area to cause problems. Meanwhile, her nephew, let's call him Todd, was treating my guest house like a frat pad. Loud music, extra cars in the driveway, people coming and going at all hours. I talked to a couple of neighbors, and turns out I wasn't the only one Karen had clashed with. One guy had his garden ripped out for violating landscape uniformity, and another got fined for having a bird feeder. A bird feeder. It felt like Karen had turned the HOA into her own little empire. But here's where things got really strange. One neighbor swore he saw Karen and Todd loading furniture into the guest house weeks before the locks were changed. That's when I knew this wasn't some random mix-up. This was planned. I couldn't let it go. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. It felt like Karen was getting away with whatever she wanted, manipulating the HOA rules to suit her and her nephew's needs. I couldn't just sit back and let her take over my property. The tension around the neighborhood was already building. People were starting to notice what was happening. Some were too scared to speak up. Karen had a way of silencing anyone who questioned her. But others, like my neighbor Dave, were starting to share more stories about Karen's questionable actions. That's when I started thinking, Maybe I wasn't the only one she was trying to control. One evening, I decided I had enough. I went over to my guest house, hoping to get some answers face to face. Maybe Todd would finally talk to me, or at least I could catch him off guard. As I stood at the door, I noticed the faint sound of laughter inside. There were more people in there than I expected. My heart started pounding. I was furious, but I needed to stay calm. I knocked, and knocked again. No answer, but I could still hear them inside. I pulled out my phone to start recording. As I stepped back, ready to confront them, something unexpected happened. I saw Karen's car pull up, driving straight toward the guest house. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was something bigger, something she'd been hiding. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what I was about to find out, but I knew I had to face her. This was it, the moment everything came to a head. As Karen stepped out of her car, I could feel the tension in the air. The way she walked, almost like she was *2* confident, made me nervous. I didn't know if she was expecting me, or if she was just so sure of herself that she thought she could get away with anything. But as I started walking toward her, something strange happened. She didn't even look surprised. It was as if she knew I'd be there. Before I could say anything, she smiled that smug smile of hers and said, "I see you've been doing some digging." My blood ran cold. How could she possibly know? I hadn't told anyone. I hadn't even posted anything on social media. "Did you really think you could outsmart me?" she continued, her voice cold, almost rehearsed. At that moment, I realized something. This wasn't about the guest house. It wasn't even about the HOA. She'd been watching me, waiting for me to make my move. And now it was like she was playing a game, and I had just walked right into it. My stomach twisted. What was she hiding? Before I could respond, Karen pulled out a piece of paper from her bag and handed it to me. It was a legal document, a notice of eviction for me from my own property. My mind raced. How was this even possible? As I scanned the paper, I saw something that made my heart stop. Karen had somehow made her nephew a co-owner of the guest house. The document claimed that I had agreed to it in a meeting that I'd never attended. My head was spinning. There was no way this was real. But the signature at the bottom, was it my signature? No, it couldn't be. Something was off, and I was about to find out just how deep this rabbit hole really went. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. That piece of paper, this bogus eviction notice, wasn't just some random attempt to scare me. This was her plan all along. She'd forged my signature, somehow manipulated documents, and pulled strings behind the scenes to make herself and her nephew co-owners. I could feel my pulse racing as I stared at the paper. This was a fight I hadn't expected, and I was barely standing on my feet. But something in me snapped. I wasn't going down like this. Not without a fight. I asked Karen, "How did you even get this? This isn't real. I never signed this." She just stood there, looking smug, like she'd already won. "You should have paid closer attention," she said, with that same cold tone. "You were too busy playing by the rules. But rules don't matter when you control the system." I couldn't let her have the last word. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Then, I turned to walk back toward the house, calling for Todd, hoping he would at least admit to the scam. But what happened next took me completely by surprise. Just as I reached the door, Karen's phone rang. She answered it quickly, her voice shaking for the first time in the entire interaction. She looked at me, eyes wide with a mix of confusion and panic. I didn't know what was happening, but then I heard her say something that made my blood run cold. "What do you mean it's not valid anymore?" Before I could process what was going on, Karen hung up, her face draining of color. She turned to me, suddenly no longer the confident woman I'd known. "You need to get your things in order," she said, her voice trembling now. "This whole thing, it's falling apart." I stood there frozen. What was she talking about? It was then that it hit me. Karen wasn't in control anymore. Someone else had been pulling the strings behind the scenes, and she was just as much a pawn as I was. But who? As I stood there, trying to piece it all together, Karen's phone buzzed again, and this time she didn't answer. She simply turned to me, looking defeated, and said, "You won, but not for long." Before I could ask what she meant, I watched as she walked toward her car, her entire demeanor shifting from cocky to rattled. I didn't know what was coming next, but it was clear that whatever game Karen had been playing, it wasn't over. And now, I was in the middle of something much bigger than a simple HOA dispute. This was only the beginning. A week later, everything came crashing down. I got a call from a lawyer, someone I'd never heard of before, telling me that the eviction notice Karen had given me wasn't just invalid, it was part of a larger scheme. The lawyer explained that Karen had been under investigation for multiple illegal activities, including forging documents and exploiting her position as HOA president for personal gain. It turned out I wasn't the first victim. Several other homeowners had been quietly targeted in similar ways, but no one had spoken up until now. Karen had been trying to cover her tracks before anyone figured out what she was doing. As for the guest house, it was officially mine again. Todd had to move out, and I had the lock changed for good. The HOA held a special meeting to vote her out of office, and honestly, it couldn't have happened fast enough. It was a bittersweet victory, though. While I had my property back, the whole ordeal left me feeling uneasy about the power these HOA boards could have over people's lives. What I learned through all this: trust your instincts and don't let anyone push you around, no matter how big or small they seem. And if something feels off, dig deeper. You might just uncover something you never expected.